Crazy. Imagine this. You're a Polish soldier in World War II, trekking through a dense forest, and you stumble upon a bear cub. Now what do? If you're like most of us, you probably curl into a ball and start crying, right? But not these guys. Apparently, the Polish are just built different. The commander, instead of running, decides to adopt the bear. Why? Because he claimed the bear had a calming influence on his men. I don't know if you've ever been within 10 feet of a grizzly, but the word I'd use is less calming and more absolutely terrifying. But get this bear was apparently a total bro. They named him Wojtek, and he would smoke cigarettes, drink beer, and even wrestle with the soldiers for fun. Keep in mind, the average grizzly is 600 pounds of pure teeth, claws, and muscle. And during battles, this absolute legend would literally carry ammunition to the front lines and was even known to help reload guns. What a goddamn hero! Want to hear about the coolest pig of all time? So there's this pig, right? She gets adopted by a squad of sailors on a German battleship called the Dresden back in World War I. The soldiers absolutely loved her, and she just kind of chilled on the ship, living the good life. They went through a lot together. A massive victory at the Battle of Coronel, a strategic retreat at the Battle of the Falklands. She was a great, loyal pig. But, well, her sailor buddies were on the wrong side of history, and when they had to sink their own ship, they left her on board like total monsters. But our girl wasn't going down like that. She jumped ship and floated on a piece of debris for an hour until an officer on a passing British ship spotted her, dove in, and pulled her to safety. You'd think she'd live a long, happy life after that, right? Just kidding. She was eventually auctioned off for pork, and her head was sold and mounted. Yeah, not the happy ending we were hoping for. Alright, our next animal isn't one you'd normally associate with the violence of war. It's better known for fluttering around aimlessly, pooping on statues, and secretly being a government drone. I'm talking, of course, about the humble pigeon. When you or I see a pigeon, we see a feathered rat. When the US government saw them, they saw potential. Specifically this one guy, B.F. Skinner. You might not know the name, but fun fact, he's the guy who popularized the timeout, the thing your parents did to you when you drew on the walls. So yeah, not the coolest dude, but he had some wild ideas. His craziest one, using pigeons as a bomb guidance system. No, I'm not joking. The idea was to put a pigeon inside a glider bomb, looking at a little screen with the target on it. The pigeon would be trained to peck at the target, and its pecks would literally steer the bomb left or right. These pigeon-powered projectiles saw a grand total of 0 uses, thankfully, due to the rise of electronic guidance systems. Every pigeon in that program could finally breathe a huge sigh of relief. Speaking of things that just won't quit, let me introduce you to Unsinkable Sam. The 20th century wasn't great with unsinkable things, and Sam was no exception. He started as the ship's cat on the massive German battleship, the Bismarck. The crew loved him, but on their very first mission in 1941, the Bismarck got blown to pieces. Only about 5% of the crew survived, and luckily, our boy Sam was one of them. He was found floating on a board hours later by a British destroyer, the HMS Cossack. So he switched sides and served on the Cossack for a few months, until, you guessed it, the ship was torpedoed and sank. Once again, Sam managed to survive and was brought to shore. From there he was transferred to another ship, a full-blown aircraft carrier, the HMS Ark Royal. And what do you think happened? It got torpedoed by a U-boat. Survivors said they found him floating on a plank, angry but quite unharmed. I mean, fair enough. At this point, the British Navy finally got the message. Sam was retired and sent to live out the rest of his 9 lives in a seaman's home, far, far away from any large body of water. But my favorite cat story from the 20th century is definitely Acoustic Kitty. Back in the 60s, tensions between the US and the Soviet Union were at an all-time high. It was all about espionage, and both sides were desperate to find new ways to eavesdrop on the other. The CIA was willing to do anything to get an edge, and they came up with some seriously wacky ideas. In this case, the plan was to turn a cat into a living, breathing microphone. The assignment was given to the CIA, and after spending $20 million, Acoustic Kitty was ready for action. They surgically implanted a radio transmitter in its skull and weaved a wire into its fur. This thing was a state-of-the-art piece of spy tech. For its first mission, they released it near the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., to eavesdrop on two men talking on a park bench. As the cat crossed the street, it was immediately hit by a taxi. Mission over. Next item. You know that moment as a kid when you throw a rock at a beehive and it explodes into a terrifying swarm? Okay, now picture that, but instead of a beehive, it's a giant metal tube. And instead of bees, it's hundreds and hundreds of bats, each carrying a tiny little napalm bomb. This was the United States' actual idea for how to attack Japan in World War II. The plan was to harvest a bunch of bats, strap tiny firebombs to them, and then drop these giant bat bombs over Japanese cities. The thinking was that the bats would fly into the nooks and crannies of the wooden and paper houses common in Japan at the time, and then spontaneously combust. In a world of brick and mortar, this might not be that effective. But in a country where houses were basically 90% paper, it was a terrifyingly clever and insane idea. That's all I got for today. If you learned something new and wild, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. You won't regret it.